Hi, I'm Kent Rively, and today I wanted to talk about something that I get asked about quite regularly, which is what to do with gold filings or reclaiming gold scrap. And I use high carat gold a lot, so I wanted to share with you a way to reclaim gold filings and be able to reuse them for rolling out new stock. So basically what you need to do is keep your gold really clean and separate from other alloys of other metals and other alloys of gold. So when I'm very careful on my workbench to keep every alloy of gold separate as I'm working, and I clean my bench between different alloys. I do most of my work in one alloy, and that's what I'm going to be cleaning up and remelting today. So we're going to come in here to my workbench here, my belly pan. Okay, so this is my belly pan. This is a typical day of work after making a ring. Let's say I'd have a pile of filings like this. Saw blades and bits of metal or steel are in there. So the first thing I do is I take a magnet. This is a bench magnet. And I pick up get all the filings and saw blade bits out, all the steel removed. And then I sweep the filings up and put them in an area where I can pick through and clean them. So this is a pretty clean batch. I've already picked through. There's no stones or bits of foreign matter in there. It's already been pretty much picked through and cleaned. Now I'm going to put this on this card and transfer it to a scoop. So what I do is you can tap on this and blow off any light material. This has already been done, but this is pretty clean. You can see there's a few bits of dark matter. If this were a little dirtier, I would go through with my optivisor and the tweezers and pick out any big pieces of foreign matter. But this is very clean. I'm going to transfer that to a scoop. So I'd say this is ready for melting. I have also here, just to show you, I keep my filings separate. This is a redder alloy of gold, obviously. This is a 20 karat pink. This is a 18 karat yellow. I keep them separate. This one has got more pieces of foreign matter that I will pick out with tweezers before I melt. But this one is ready to go, so we're going to take this over to the melting area. Okay, so this is my alloying and melting area. I have a hood here for evacuating the gases from the torch and the melting procedure, which is a really good idea because it does put off a good bit of toxic fumes. I have an ingot mold ready here for pouring, and I have a 5-ounce crucible on a handle that I use for pouring. What I do is I take some scrap metal of the same alloy that I'm going to be melting the filings of, and I put that in the crucible first and melt it down, and then I add the filings to the puddle. And we'll be doing this close up, but I just want to give you a quick overview of what's going to happen. So I'm going to put these into my crucible, these scrap, and I'm saving the filings for after I've started the melt. Okay, so my favorite torch is an acetylene oxygen torch. I like it because it has a softer flame, it uses a little bit less oxygen than propane does, provides more of a reducing flame for the melting of gold. Here I'm starting to melt scrap, and my flame is pretty hot. I've got a long flame. You can't really see it in the video, but it's about 2-inch long inner blue flame just beyond the point of turning yellow. So if you added a little more acetylene or took a little oxygen off, the flame tip would turn yellow. That's the perfect flame for melting. So what I do is I add borax flux continuously during my melting process. I will just sprinkle a little bit here and there, and I'm always observing the surface of the metal to see if there's any anomalies happening, and if so, I just will put a little bit of flux on it, which requires removing the flame and then dropping the flux in. I'm also using a carbon stirring rod to remove extra flux and to stir the metal. At this point, I'd like to tell you about my ingot mold setup. You'll see that I have it raised above the crucible so that as I'm heating my metal, I can warm the ingot mold. I usually use beeswax to lubricate the mold before pouring. I don't need to use it every time, but I find that it works great for producing a nice shiny ingot. So my scrap is now almost a full puddle. I'm stirring it now with the rod. You'll see there's a little bit of borax on the end of the rod. It picks up the molten excess flux as you're working. So I remove my flame and dump the filings down right on top of the puddle. And then I immediately reduce the flame to a very reducing soft flame that doesn't blow very hard. So it's a soft flame. If you see sparks flying off the filings, your flame is a little bit too intense and it's either blowing too hard or heating too quickly and the metal is sparking off. You'll see a little bit of sparking in the video here. You want to keep that under control as much as possible throughout the whole melt. I let a crust form on the top of the filings and then sprinkle a pretty liberal amount of borax. And then I increase the flame slightly so it's a little bit hotter and blowing a little bit harder. Now that there's a crust on top, the filings don't blow away as easily. I'm again adding lots of borax. Increasing the flame again. So what happens now is the borax removes impurities from the filings and a crust forms, and then eventually I take the stirring rod and peel back the crust to expose the filings underneath and add more borax. That's what I'm about to do here. Peel back the crust. Then I'll remove the flame and add more borax. So this process goes on for a while. I do this very gradually because you don't want to overheat any one section. You want to very gradually let the borax soak into the filings so it can remove all the impurities from between the filings as they're melting together. When you do it this way, the filings will melt into a beautiful smooth ingot or puddle of gold. I'm always observing the surface of the gold, make sure there's no sparking and that the flux is at the surface looks fairly clean. If I see dark spots or I see sparks, then I'm always stop the flame and add a little more borax. I'm always stirring the crust and changing its position so I can get more borax exposed to the areas that haven't been exposed yet. And now we're getting close to having a complete puddle here. So this technique works really well for high carat golds in particular, but you may want to stay away from doing this with silver and carat golds that have a lot of copper in them or nickel or other metals that react to the melting process. By now the ingot mold has gotten pretty warm and it will receive the gold very nicely without, I still warm it up with a torch occasionally just to make sure it's nice and hot. The last step is removing excess flux from the melt. I also sometimes shake the crucible to make sure the metal is totally liquid and that if there's any impurities they would rise to the top. Now I'm stirring with my rod to make sure everything's clean, and then I will start to use the rod to remove excess flux. The flux, borax, becomes glass and then floats off to the side of the molten gold and becomes accessible to the carbon stirring rod. See, there it is on the end of the stick there. You can see a nice blob of glass forming there, and you just touch it to the side and it picks up more glass and becomes quite a large knob. One last application of borax and we should be ready to pour. So now I'll take the crucible up above the ingot mold. I'll have to change hands here very quickly. And we'll bring the crucible up, put the lip of the crucible on the ingot mold, and keep that molten metal hot and make the pour. Okay, now I'm going to take it to the quench. Okay, so I'm going to pull the ingot out of the water here. Dry it off and have a look. Yeah, the top of the ingot looks really clean. It's a good ingot. As I needed to make some sheets, so I poured a sheet ingot. Come in close and have a look at that. That's a normal oxidation for the top of the ingot. And that's the underside. It's a little bit grainy, but it should roll out just fine. So I hope this was useful information for you. I made a good ingot here. This will be great for rolling into sheet. And I have probably, doing this technique, I've probably saved myself tens of thousands of dollars over the years. Of course, I've been working for 30 or more years in gold, but I've saved a lot of money from not sending in scrap for recycling by just doing what I've just shown you, keeping my filings really clean, heating them properly, pouring them out and rolling them into new stock. So I hope this has been good for you, useful information for you, and I hope to see you again in another event of some kind. Take care.